to the October version of Data+Women London. It's so great to have you all here. The agenda today is that I'm just going to do a little intro and a little welcome about what this event is and kind of why I think it's so important. We're then going to have a couple of talks, one with Sarah on the importance of networking, and then I'm going to ask Emacs some questions about women's networks and why they are important. We've then got a section where I'm going to get you guys to come step up and move around and guide you through some networking, and then we're going to just have some drinks and socializing as well. So first up, oh, and also worth noting, we have some people online, so we try to always do hybrid events. So the first half is online and recorded, so those online and for you guys to watch back, or if there's anyone that hasn't been able to come. The first talk will be recorded, and then the second section will just be in person, so we'll say goodbye to those online. So, welcome to Data+Women London. For those that haven't been to a Data+Women London event before, welcome. It's really great to see you here. We are a Tableau user group, a data user group, and we like to highlight and celebrate the achievements of women and really want to promote the stories that they have to tell about their experiences in the data industry. So we like to create inclusive events that bring people together, sharing their stories in a safe space, and really can foster connection and really just have a nice safe space to share everybody's experiences. And it's also not just for women, we welcome everybody to come to these events as well. So welcome to our team. We've got Josie and Karine and myself. We run the Data+Women London, so it's good fun. We've got a few events coming up. And a massive thank you to Tableau Salesforce for hosting us today. It's great to use the venues that we can. There'll be a little bit of food and drink afterwards at, I think, 5 o'clock. We have to leave at 6, but if there is a fire escape, if there is a fire alarm, it's not planned, and we'll be told where to go, but it's just kind of back the way we came. So, yeah. So this event is something I kind of wanted to bring together about 6 months ago. And I think that for my own personal journey, I think that the networks that you create within the data industry and within the Tableau communities are so special. And I think that it's really tough because when I first started using Tableau, it was about 6 years ago, and it was through the information lab and the data school. And they've always done a really great job of fostering communities and pushing all of the trainees to go to various user groups. So I went to my first Tableau user group. I think it was a storytelling with data, one at the old Tableau offices. And it was really good fun. It was terrifying and scary, and trying to talk to people and push yourself into different comfort zones is just really scary. But I really enjoyed it, and I started going to more Data+Women ones and more London ones. And I even then got the confidence to join as one of the co-leads and apply. And then that was at the beginning of 2020. So I never actually got to do my first in-person Data+Women event until last year. But we moved to everything online, and it was all virtual, and it was really good fun, and I learned loads. But I think through the virtual environment, you lose a lot of that connection because one person speaks at a time and you get Zoom fatigue, and it's just not necessarily a collaborative environment. Well, it can be, but it's just a lot harder. So after that kind of dip post-COVID, I wanted to bring the Data+Women groups back last year. So we relaunched last year. And I think that those kind of opportunities to get connections are really important, but because the in-person events are kind of only really kicking off again over the last year, I think a lot of those skills you have from networking have been lost a bit. So I wanted to put together some really inspirational people, and I'm really excited to learn from them. Put together an event where you could be helped with your networking and learn how and get some tips in a real safe environment where you can connect with lovely people, and it's just meant to be fun, and hopefully it will be. So that's kind of the story about why this event is happening. It'd be great to get your feedback because this is a very different type of event than ones we usually run. So get feedback would be amazing, because theoretically, if it's successful, we could do it again in kind of 6 or 9 months' time. So yeah, some feedback at the end would be amazing. But without further ado, I will hand over to Sarah.
Thank you, Ellie. Yeah. Yeah. Or just shout. Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Bartlett. Is that a little bit better? Yeah. I could hear it as well, but I was stood right by the speaker. So I'm currently work as a director of BI enablement at JLL, so Jones Lang LaSalle. We're a real estate company. You probably see our names all over buildings, all over London. Like wherever I go, I end up seeing JLL somewhere. I'm also a 5-time Tableau visionary, 7-time Tableau public ambassador. I'm a co-leader of the London Tableau user group, and I'm a founder of the Iron Quest project. That's a project based on the IronViz competition, which is currently running. So it's designed to help prepare people for the competition. If you are interested in IronViz, I'm going to be running a IronViz feedback initiative. So it's worth just chatting to me afterwards because that's not the topic of this talk, but I'd love to talk to you about that. I still got a really bad echo. But there's people online. Yeah, maybe. Is that a little bit better? Still really loud. Yeah, okay. If you want to find me online, you can find me pretty much everywhere. It's at Sarah Loves Data, and I've got a website which is sarahlovesdata.co.uk. So I really do love data. But I always find these slides are a little bit kind of formal, and I'm a lot more than just those kind of titles. So I really like to travel. So these are some of the places I've been to in the last year. I've been to Norway 3 times. 2 of those times was to go hiking. I actually went more recently. It's not a picture here, and I nearly died, which was fun. So I can talk about that as well. But yeah, mainly around Europe, but that's something that I really like to do as well as hiking. But today we're going to be talking about networking. Now, similar to Ellie, like when I first joined the Tableau community, I was afraid to talk to anyone. And I want to go back to the beginning with my story. And I don't think anyone here knows this story, which is good. And some of you feature in it, which is funny. But I was doing some research on networking and the power of networking, particularly for women in the lead up to this talk. And I found these stats quoted in a few different places. I think we should take them with a pinch of salt, but a lot of them were saying about the power of networking when it comes to your career, and how a lot of jobs go to referrals. So people will refer people in their network for jobs, or they'll say, oh, I've got a friend that will be good for this, and then they'll bring them in. And so I think that's really important to bear in mind as we talk about networking and its powers. But my story is going to be focused on this man who's called Paul Chapman. He's my current boss at JLL. This picture was taken, I think, in about 2018 in New Orleans at the Tableau conference. Now, imagine we were walking around the conference and then we see this huge picture of us on the wall from the prior year. So it's like, oh God. Well, we had to obviously get a picture with it. But I've known Paul since 2016. And I just want to talk about like that kind of that period and how that's had an impact on my career. So if I go right back, actually go back to 2014. So I'm not going to go back before this picture. In 2014, I think in about November, I was sent on a training course to learn Tableau. Didn't know what Tableau was at the time. I was terrified. Nobody at my organization in my team used Tableau. I went on this 2-day course and met a colleague called Becca, somebody I'd kind of been interacting with at work, but she worked in Bristol and I worked in Newbury, so we didn't really like see each other, but we would chat online and stuff. So we were both on this course together. I learned Tableau, came back to work, didn't really know how to use it. Came off the course all confident, and then when I got back to the office, I was like, actually, I don't really know what I'm doing here. So then I started looking for the community online, blog posts and things like that, and found some content, but back then it wasn't like what it is today. You didn't have community projects or anything like that. So it was quite difficult to find the support that I needed. So then I thought, well, let me go to the Tableau conference in London. So this was even before they called it Tableau or TC Europe or whatever. This was called Tableau Conference on Tour in London. I think they used to do different ones around different cities in Europe. So then July 2015, I went along to this event with one of my colleagues, who's a guy called Daniel. We didn't speak to each other the entire conference. I think it was 2 days. I saw him once. It was like, hi and bye. Like, I didn't know anyone here. I didn't speak to anyone at this conference. And I think that might surprise some people here because I do like talking to people. And I was like, I didn't know how to network back then. So I didn't talk to anyone the entire conference, didn't really have a good time. And kind of that was that. So then fast forward to May 2016, my friend Becca, who you'll see in a picture in a minute, we've been talking at work and we were like, we really should go to a Tableau user group. We're probably beneficial. And so I went to my first ever London Tableau user group. I managed to dig out the picture. It was at Google near King's Cross in May. Becca and I were both terrified. We didn't know anybody there. We kind of sat in the corner. I remember we saw Andy Kriebel, who some of you will know, and we went, oh my God, it's Andy Kriebel. And we were too scared to talk to him. And we saw a couple of other people that were quite famous. And again, we just stayed within ourselves. If people came over to us, then we spoke to them, but we didn't make an effort to talk to anybody. But I'm calling it out because I wouldn't have gone to that tug had it not been for her support. But shortly after that, we went to the Tableau conference in London. So I think it was called Tableau conference by this point. So this is Becca. And this was a couple of months later. Now, actually, I missed out a key point from that story is at the time, the London tug was run by Paul Chapman, Paul Benoob, and Nick Bignell. And Becca had met Paul Chapman on some kind of course, or they'd gone to an event together, but she knew him. So she introduced me to him at that event. Obviously, he was terrified, like he was a tug leader. I was like, hi. But I knew him, and I've got to meet the other leaders at that day as well. So then when we went to the event in July, they were there. So we got, and I think Paul spoke at that conference. So we had that connection, and through those connections, we were able to make other connections. And that was like my first in the community. Now, at that event, the Information Lab was sponsoring, and they always used to have a pinball machine on their stand, and you could enter a competition. So you could either be the highest scoring pinball player and get entered into a draw to win a prize to Tableau conference, or maybe even the top scorer. I think actually the top scorer got a prize, which was a ticket to the Tableau conference in America, which was in November. Or you could enter into a prize draw, and then your name would be pulled out of the hat, and then potentially you would win a ticket. So I'm not good at pinball, so I was never going to win that prize to get the highest score, but I went into the prize draw, and it was kind of a case of you just filled your details in on an iPad, then you played the pinball machine. So I did that, didn't think anything of it. And then a couple of weeks after this conference, I get a call from Tom Brown, who's the head of the Information Lab. He's like, what are you doing in November? I'm like, I don't know. This is like August. And he's like, would you like to come to the Tableau conference in Austin in the US? And essentially, I'd won that competition, and they were wanting to give me this free ticket. So I was like, yeah, of course. But like completely terrified because I didn't know anyone. But they said that I could tag along with their team. So sure enough, in November, I went to the Tableau conference, and prior to the conference, Information Lab often run kind of like network, I guess you call them networking events, like social events where you can get together and have some fun. So before this one, we actually went zip wiring over some lakes in Austin. So I was like thrown right in the deep end because I didn't work for any of these people. A lot of the people in this picture work for the Information Lab at the time. You've got Paul there as well. You've got the other Pauls. It's kind of like friends or customers of the Information Lab. And I think I was a customer, but really I was none of the above. So I was there tagging along with them, but this gave me an amazing opportunity to meet lots of different people and be introduced to lots of different people. And at that event, I was at a bar with Paul Chapman, Paul Benoob, and Nick, who ran the London Tug, and they were talking about the event that they'd run at Google, which I went to, and how they had some negative feedback from a woman who said that it was too male-dominated, so all their leadership team were male. All the speakers at that event were male, and they were like, we really need some women. I was like, oh, I'll do it. Like, I'll be a leader. So they brought me on, and I didn't really think too much about it at the time. So then I joined the tug team. So I joined the tug team I don't have a picture, but in December 2016. So it's about nearly 8 years ago now. And then from 2017 to 2023, I was running the tug with Paul and a few others. Like the team changed over the years. We went to Tableau conference every year. We did like loads of things together. And then in December 2023, sadly, Paul Chapman left the team because he'd been running the tug for probably about 10 years at that point. He thought it was time for something new. But in the meantime, in October 2023, I actually joined JLL. And then more recently, he became my boss. Now, I wouldn't have joined JLL, I don't think, if I had never made that connection before. So really, it's gone like full circle. So I think that just shows the power of networking. And in between all those years, I made so many different connections with different people. And I don't have that fear that I used to have where it's like, oh, I don't want to talk to anyone. I'm going to stand in the corner. It's just my network has grown like exponentially. And if you're wondering, I am still running the tug. So this is where you come in, Alina. So Alina's one of my tug co-leaders. And this is the tug today. Mine is Ellie, which obviously you know Ellie, and the guy in the white shirt, he was a speaker. But this is our tug team. And we actually have more women on the leadership team now than we do have men. So I think that's a fantastic achievement. But yeah, so it's really through that experience, I was able to really overcome that fear of networking, which I know a lot of us have. Now, again, I just want to hammer home some of these stats, but 79% of professionals consider networking to be vital to career success. And I truly do stand behind those stats from my own experience. And in terms of why networking is important, hopefully I've touched on some of these things, but it can really help with your career progression. Obviously, having a bigger network will open up more opportunities to you. I think it's important to have a network for support and guidance as well. So I've seen over the years, I've been able to call on my network for advice, or if, maybe I'm in a challenging situation at work and I want someone's help with that, I can call on particular people in my network who may have those skills. So the broader your network and then the more diverse your network, the more likely it is you're going to have somebody that you can turn to, which is really, really beneficial in this industry. And I think as well, just improving your confidence. So I think the more you have these conversations, the more you do something, the more confident you become. And I think back to the December 2016 when I gave my first TUG talk, I was so scared. I didn't eat anything all day, and the event was in the evening, and I was literally like this. It was the worst talk I've ever given. But then since then, each talk has been better. So I think just through the power of practice, you will get better and you will become more confident. And remember, everyone's in the same boat as well. I think we all start somewhere. And I recognize networking, maybe you may feel like it's hard. Even I still feel like this way sometimes, particularly if I go to an event where I don't know anyone, or maybe it's a different industry or something, it is quite difficult. You have to put in the effort. But if you don't have to put in the effort, you'll never kind of achieve your goals, if you like. So I think with networking, it's important that you do set out with a goal. So it might be that you want to meet a particular person. You might want to meet particular types of people. Maybe you want to set a goal that you're going to go to a different kind of event. And I think it's quite important that you diversify the kind of events you go to, because you'll find different groups of people at different events. And I think that's where the introvert piece comes in. So I consider myself to be an extrovert, but I think, and so it's very easy for me to say, oh, introverts can network, but I think this is where you can set goals. So as an introvert, you could say, I'm going to go and do this one thing, and once I'm done, I can go home. And you've not got to stick around and feel uncomfortable. So that's where I think those two things go hand in hand. Remember, with networking, it's all about relationship building. It's not about you just going in and telling somebody how great you are. They don't want to hear that. In most cases, when you're having a conversation with someone, the other person will want to talk about themselves. So when I'm going into a networking conversation, I'm often driving the conversation where I'm asking them things about them that they can then freely talk about, because if in case you haven't already noticed, people love talking about themselves. So I find the conversation flows better if you ask people questions about them rather than going up to somebody and saying, hey, I'm this, I'm that. And they'll just be like, okay, cool. What am I going to do with that information? So that helps. And then when you're having these conversations, there's nothing worse than having a ended conversation where it's like, how are you? Fine. What do you do? This. And then that conversation doesn't go anywhere. And that puts a ton of pressure on you, somebody in that position. So always try and ask open-ended questions that can then lead into a different conversation. So maybe you ask them, how did you find out about this event? And then they'll say, oh, maybe my colleague told me, and then they'd been to a different event, and then maybe you went to that event. I don't know. Those conversations can actually lead somewhere rather than asking closed questions. Personal branding, I think, ties into this as well. So when you're meeting with somebody, one of these events, chances are you might connect on something like LinkedIn. It's important that your online presence matches what you want to portray. So if you're saying to somebody, hey, here's my LinkedIn, and it's not updated with your latest job, it's not setting the impression that you want to create. So it's important that any online presence is up to date and it represents what you want to be known for. So try and have a think about what it is that you want to be known for. Everyone has kind of a thing. I think mine has become enablement, and the data enablement is kind of like my thing. But just try and have a think about what you want that to be, and then just try and morph everything you have online into that kind of persona. And also have somewhere where people can find you. So if you don't have a LinkedIn, maybe you've got a blog or whatever it is, have somewhere where they can find you online, because I think that's always helpful. And I wanted to come up with a creative title, but networking isn't a one-night stand. It's not like a one and done thing. After you've met someone for the first time, always follow that up with a message, maybe the next day. Don't be too keen and don't do it the same day, but say it's great to meet you at whatever event, and maybe touch on your conversation that you had with them a little bit so they can recall who you were. And then even after that, keeping in touch with your connections. So it could be that you've met somebody and they're quite active on LinkedIn and they're posting different things. you can, you can comment on their posts, or you can and then you keep that connection going. It doesn't have to be you keep DMing them, but you engage with their content. Hopefully they engage with yours. And I say beware of the ghosts, because some people will never get back to you. They'll just ignore you. I get a ton of messages on LinkedIn, and I have to be honest, I don't reply to all of them. And that's not me being nasty. It's just sometimes I just forget. Like I'm sure some of you will get texts from friends, and then you just forget to get back to them. And then a week goes by, and you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't get back to that person. And it's exactly like that. So people will ignore you. So don't be offended if you send someone a LinkedIn request and they don't respond. It's just one of those things. It's going to happen. Just get over it and move on. And it's make it about them, not you. So when in all these conversations, again, just see how you can find a way of benefiting that person. There may be like a unique skill that you can offer them, or some advice in a particular area, but making it all about them, I think, is important. I've found another stat for you. So 80% of women leaders use networking to drive career success. So I think with women in particular, networking is even more important. And some of the research I did found that men tend to have like a strong central network, whereas women benefit more from bigger but smaller networks, so different networks for different things. And having like an inner circle as well for women is important, where they have like some trusted advisors that they can turn to for advice, whereas men might have that, but it's less kind of established. They're happier talking to bigger groups. I thought it was quite interesting. And if we talk about career advancement when it comes to networking in particular, again, set a goal, set goals about who you want to meet, where you want to meet them, when you want to meet them, how you're going to go about this. I strongly believe if you don't ask, you don't get. So if there's somewhere that you want to work and you see someone, you happen to meet someone who works there, ask them, have you got any jobs going like that I could do? If you don't ask that question, you'll never know. And they also won't know that you're looking either. Ask people to introduce you to people. I've got another slide coming up on this, but if you meet somebody that works at a particular company and you want to meet someone from that company, maybe you could ask them to introduce you, and that gives you that in. There's a lot of inside jobs that you don't get advertised that are found through networking. I think probably the last 3 jobs that I've done, they weren't advertised anywhere, and they just came through word of mouth conversations. So unless you have this network, you're not going to find out about those jobs. And you look at jobs on LinkedIn, some of them have 100+ applications. So it's very difficult to get selected just from applying for a job alone without knowing anybody or knowing the hiring manager. And finally, just remember to lift as you climb. And I think that's really important for women in particular. So if you're advancing through your career and you've got other friends that are struggling, see if you can help them. See if you can help find them jobs and help pay it back so they can move up with you. And then finally, just my tips for success. One thing I found really useful, and it's quite a fun game to do, and maybe we could do it today, is for everyone that you meet, ask them to introduce you to 2 people. So that exponentially expands your network, and it's quite a fun kind of challenge to set yourself. Always try and offer value to people, so look for ways that you can help them. Don't expect anything in return. Set yourself goals, as I've said a couple of times, and then just make sure you follow up with those connections to constantly cultivate your network and grow it and nurture it. That's everything I had for today. Thank you for listening. If you want to find me, I've got my contact details there, or you can connect with me on LinkedIn. Thank you. Any questions? Go ahead. Yeah. I would say this is exactly the same as what I've said already. I don't think it really matters about gender. I think it might be a little bit more intimidating if it's, especially in data, a lot of the events are male dominated. So it might be perhaps you approach a woman first and have a conversation with them, and maybe they can introduce you to somebody else. But I wouldn't really change my approach in that kind of circumstance. Okay. Anyone else? Yeah, go ahead.
When it comes to like keeping up with like past employers, or if you've just graduated, keeping up with like lecturers or people from your university, do you have any tips specific to that?
So I'm definitely not the best at that. It's really hard to do this and keep on top of everything. Maybe you could, if you really want to be organized about it, like create some reminders in your calendar to reach out to people at certain intervals. Just being active on social media and seeing what people are posting, I think is helpful, because you can you might have met somebody 6 months ago, and then 6 months later they've changed jobs or they're doing something new and exciting, and just following like posts and writing comments on those posts, I think is helpful, when it sometimes will give you reminders that, oh, I really should reach out to that person. So that's kind of my approach, is really maybe set reminders, but also just try and keep on top of things and stay engaged.
What do you think the impact of social media is, say, on networking successfully, let's say?
I'd say it's huge. So for me in particular, so when I think back at that 2015 conference that I went to, I didn't talk to anyone. The one thing it did tell me was to join Twitter. And I know things were different back then with Twitter, but that was kind of where the community lived. And so one thing I learned from that conference is that I saw people with tweets on the big screen at the conference. I was like, oh, okay, I can join Twitter and then follow these people. And then I was made aware of events that were happening that I wouldn't have known about otherwise. So I think nowadays it's more LinkedIn, but it's been incredibly beneficial for me. So I think it's important that you have that presence and you're active on these platforms. The platforms where the people that you want to be with live. So it could be, that might even be Discord or something, I don't know, but it's making sure that you pick the platforms for where the people that you want to kind of network with kind of engage.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. It's been really great to hear from you. I think I remember back in the day that I was terrified to talk to you. So it was great to come full circle and hear your full story. Yeah. I remember as well, like, I think your point about social media is really interesting in terms of Twitter used to be massive. And I remember getting excited when certain people would like a tweet, including yourself. So it's quite exciting. So there's loads of, everyone's got to start somewhere. And it's nice to have heard your journey. I don't think I'd heard your full intro into the Tableau networking stuff before. So it's very cool. Thank you. Any questions from people online? Give them a chance as well. Awesome. Well, thank you, Sarah. A little round of applause for Sarah. And now we're going to hear from Emax. I'm going to ask you some questions. We're going to try and pin you to the screen as well.
Awesome. Hi, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Oh, we can't hear you. You worked
no.
earlier. Oh, is this because I've not? Can you try again?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, there we go.
Great.
Hi, welcome. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's my morning here. I'm actually in Seattle with the Tableau team right now. And thank you for having me participate. I am so passionate about this topic. So I've been looking forward to this. Ellie and I first talked about this event when we met earlier in London this year, and I've been really looking forward to it. So appreciate you having me virtually.
No, I'm really pleased that you've managed to come along. So thank you so much for taking the time. So to dive straight in, I know you are passionate about building women's networks. Tell us about the mums community that you've started at Salesforce.
So when we were first designing this chat, I just was thinking about my immediate life of the moms group, but I was thinking about this more last night, and actually I want to tell a quick story about early in my life. I think the times that I've needed mom or women's networks the most are the times that they just didn't exist and I had no resources to me. Early in my career, this might surprise some of you, but I actually was in the golf industry. And if you know anything about golf, it is very male dominated, white dominated, no diversity, no women. And I was very, very young and actually got a lot of attention in a positive way for being young and female and smart. And I was doing everything from, measuring courses to rating courses to organizing conferences for golf administrators all over the world. It was a very exciting time in my life. And it also allowed me to move multiple different places across the United States. And in one of those moves, I took a chance on a specific company where I worked at. A company was all men. I was the only female, and actually was harassed during that time by my executive director. That was more threatened by me and the attention I was getting in the industry, and did anything he could do to put me down. And it was verbally, it was in writing. And I ended up resigning from the company. I ended up taking a severance pay, and then I ended up in a new city where I knew nobody, to just get away from that situation. And had I had women surrounding me and empowering me to handle that situation different, I don't think I would have been as fear-based, excuse me, to just cower and just walk away. Meanwhile, this person got to carry on with their behavior and be a well-known executive in the golf industry. So for me, like, I really took that as a hard lesson where I didn't have, that type of women's network. The same happened with when I had my first child. I was, now later in life, but also one of the first women to have, children in marketing, especially at Salesforce. Like, everyone was just so focused on their career. And a lot of parents that were in our organization, their kids were much older, they're teenagers or in high school and couldn't really relate. And unfortunately, I had a very horrific experience during the birth of my daughter and actually almost died. And during that time, I was hospitalized for the first month of her life. I was an episode of House. I was being monitored by so many different doctors all over California. My case was being presented at a medical conference to figure out like how I could get support and what was wrong with me. And then I didn't have a maternity leave. I had a disability leave. And then I just came back to work. And it was as if like nothing happened when I came back, but I had so much trauma in my life, PTSD from this experience, but also no other women around me to help me through just all things of pregnancy, the changes that happen to your body, the different elements of parenting and returning to work, and those struggles of finding that work-life harmony. I call it harmony, not balance. I don't think those two things are ever balanced. So it's finding that harmony to work together. And so what I did was, I was like, well, I just need to find other people like me. And that clearly doesn't exist right now. So I'm going to create that. And it just started with a couple moms. I reached out to some women that I knew either were in their late stage of their pregnancy or just had a baby, and asked if they would have lunch with me. And I started a monthly lunch at the top of the Salesforce Tower in San Francisco. And it did that. It was maybe like 12 people, maybe 15 women that eventually, one would soon bring another person. But what was really great about it was a very safe space. And so any topic could be discussed, from, what should I do with things happening with my boss, to I'm having trouble breastfeeding, or now I'm in potty training session. So it just became this thing. And then when COVID hit, I tried to maintain the same connection virtually. And to be honest, it just didn't work. Like, I would put the monthly lunches, like, hey, so bring your own lunch, let's participate virtually. And nobody showed up. Maybe like my bestie every once in a while, but it was very discouraging. I was like, oh my gosh, I've had all this momentum and I was really relying on this network. And at that time, Salesforce acquired Slack. And one of my friends said, just start a Slack channel. Like, let's see, what happens. And that was, over the last 7 years now, we have over 700 women that are now part of this. It's called Salesforce Mamas Group. And it has been amazing. And in the beginning, I really had to facilitate and help moderate and help get people to come out of their shell to participate. Everything from, resources to asking questions to just, we have Halloween coming up. What are your kids' costumes? Like, post photos. And now the whole community on it just runs itself. I mean, people are asking questions every single day, and very safe space, again, from, things that are happening with their body. There's a woman that posted that is struggling with a potential miscarriage. Like, there's so many things that happen in our lives. And, we're surrounded by people from work all the time. And I think it's important to find those communities that can help have, those networks. So I'm very passionate about supporting women in general, and especially working mothers. It's very, very hard. And I think it's also important. I love with Sarah's story is also finding male advocates. I think that's an important part of the journey as well.
Well, thank you. I think I took a lot away from that. I think I really liked your use of the word harmony instead of balance. And also just the power of those networks, and the way that you approach different types of networks in terms of your lunches and then moving online is really powerful as well. Because you need that support, and you need that kind of different levels and different access points as well, because not everyone's going to be able to open up in person as the same way that they would do online and things. So it's nice to have the accessibility there. How do you think women's networks can contribute to career advancement and professional development?
Yeah, I think Sarah really hit this nail on the head. I mean, it's really about that connection to help, get that advice along the way. So I think it's important to be surrounded by other female leaders that can help you navigate different challenging times or just even day-to-day life. I think the more that you invest in building those relationships, the more you remain top of mind. I mean, it's similar to what Sarah was discussing. If I'm hiring for someone, the first thing I'm thinking about is my network before going out, externally beyond that. And so staying top of mind for leaders and female leaders, I think is really important. And then also just continuing to have a growth mindset. I don't know if any of you heard, the stat about how you are the average of the 5 people you surround yourself with. And I take that very seriously. In fact, every year I make a goal for who are my 5 this year. And if you do an assessment of your life right now, like if you think about the 5 most important people in your life, or maybe the 5 most important women in your life, and who are they? Are they your peers? Are that, are more like a lateral, like you're all in it together? Are there women that you strive to be? Are there women that you are trying to bring up? And then what stage are you at in your career of where you want to advance? So if you are trying to move up and do different things, then your 5 should be those people that you aspire to be. And I think it's a really good self-assessment, multiple times during the year. And just broader in your life, who are the 5 people that you are surrounding yourself with the most? Are some people, maybe more toxic for your life at that moment because they have their own personal things going on? Maybe you need to back away from that so you're not bringing that toxicity into your life. So it's a really important exercise. And throughout my entire career, professionally, I've always picked 5 every year. And I'm like, okay, these are the 5 people that by the end of the year, I want to have really meaningful relationships with. And that takes work, which is also why I only pick 5, because it is a lot of work to invest in those relationships. But I think it's a really great exercise for everyone to try and evaluate and put that into work.
I really love that, and I'm definitely going to be taking that on as a tip myself. I think that it's a nice way to think about how to talk to more people at work and how to talk to the right people as well. And I think that's really, really powerful. But I think joining or attending events like this one or approaching someone you've not spoken to before can be really scary. So what advice would you give for new members?
I think, well, it's funny because both, you and Sarah use the word, terrifying, scary. I mean, that is totally true. And I think we need to come from a place of being more vulnerable. I actually was at an event. I went to a professional development event last week. It was for 120 people, and it was positioned as an invite-only executive event. So I thought I was coming into this event like with everyone not knowing each other and everyone being individually invited. And as soon as I walked in, I saw all these tables that had like sponsorship tables where a company like Informatica, for example, may have sponsored the entire table and they brought their entire team. And there was so many different teams there. And I quickly realized I was the only person there. And so the first thing I did was I'm like, okay, who else looks a little lonely, like around the room? Who else looks like they are by themselves? And I found a woman that I walked up to and said, and I was vulnerable and I said, I don't know anybody here. Do you? And she was like, actually, I don't either. I was like, great, let's go sit together. And we sat down and, it's always the typical chat, like, where are you from? What do you do? That kind of thing. I don't know if anyone has binge watched Nobody Wants This yet as fast as I have, but there is this tip in this funny new show where someone said, similar to Sarah, like people love talking about themselves, always kind of hang on the last thing that they said. And how do you get them to talk more? And so this woman I met, for example, was from Austin. And so I was like, oh, well, tell me, how did you get to Austin? And it just opened up this whole amazing story about to get to Austin. And then in the end, I ended up learning so much about her. Also a point of being vulnerable, we were doing a session about resilience and how do you transform resilience into giving back. And I had shared the similar story of, my daughter and almost passing during her delivery. And that was me being vulnerable to have that connection. So then at the end of the event, they have this reception, and that's when I almost just like shut down again. Like I was making connection, doing good, but then it was, a bunch of people standing around, and I was like, okay, how do I navigate this? And so I just went up to someone else and said, hey, can you introduce me to a group? I'd love to start networking with some other folks. And so again, that vulnerability to, it's okay that you're alone. And then the last thing that happened was I was very south of San Francisco, and traffic was going to take me 2 hours to get home. I had found out this one woman didn't have a flight until 11 p.m. and she had nothing to do. And so I said, do you want to go grab dinner? And she was so surprised, like we had just met. But, I'm pretty outgoing. I thought we had some sort of a connection, and we went and had dinner. She came in my car, which is always kind of funny. And at the end of dinner, she said, thank you so much for doing this, because often we meet people, you connect on LinkedIn, and there's no follow-up. Or it is, you might be checking in, but it's typically you don't follow up until you need something or you want something. And she's like, now I actually really feel connected to you. Like, you're really top of mind. And we never would have done that had we not had dinner. So I guess my lessons are: be vulnerable, don't be afraid to ask for help, and then also really lean in. Like, you have to foster these relationships, and it can be as simple as just grabbing dinner over an hour, or it's that continuous follow-up depending on how you engage, on LinkedIn and things like that, to make sure you're continuing to build that connection.
Yeah, I think those are some really powerful tips there. And I think that layer of vulnerability can really help humanize you as well. Like, so it's a big intimidation factor going to talk to people that you might not know, or like even when I first met you back at World Tour properly, I got Greg, who I knew already, to say, hey, I really want to meet Emacs. Can you introduce us? And it's just that case of vulnerability can actually make someone feel more like a person rather than the scary figure that you want to meet or whatever. So I think that's a really important bit. So thank you.
I mean, I felt the same at Tableau conference. I was at, our data night out, and I met Cesar Pico. Then I was like, I've never met the twins before. Can you go find the twins for me? And, because like you all mentioned, it's like these famous people in the Tableau community that I had never met. He was like, oh my God, I'll text them right now. And I just had like a really wonderful time then with the twins and Cesar and some other folks. So I think it's really great to ask for help, because people are willing to help you to connect. No one's going to say no.
That's so great. I love that. And how do you think women in leadership positions can empower others through this network?
The biggest thing is helping bring people along with you and building them up. For me, I am so focused, especially in my team, of finding, especially more junior women, how can they find other mentors that are women? For example, I was chatting with someone from my team yesterday, and I said to her, I was like, hey, do you have any mentors? And she was like, well, no, not really. And I knew like areas that were important to her. Maybe she was a little struggling. And I was like, okay, I have the perfect person for you. This person is so welcoming and would love to mentor you, but also it needs to be a natural, connection. Like, do you mind if I do an introduction for you? And then you could take it from there and see what happens. So I think it's really important to you then be that connector from a leadership perspective, and also just help coach people along. I have this really awesome document, and I'm happy to also share it with this group, or I call it Assessing My. And it's every single exercise I've ever received from a coach or a training. And it's assessing everything from your energy to, your values, what's important to you, what's missing in your life, what really energizes you in your life. And I think often we think we know these things, but if you actually take time assessing different aspects of your life, then you figure out what the gaps are. And if you know what those gaps are, what are people that are around you that you think are filling in those gaps, and how can they help you? And I think women in leadership need to be those gap fillers and those connectors to fill those gaps.
Yeah, that's so great. I think the filling the gap thing is really important, and I really like the idea of taking people along with you. So if you're going to something, or you've seen some conference that's on and available and accessible, bring people along, or like let other women know that you're going. And that also can help with the intimidation factor, I think, in terms of it's a little less scary, like Sarah was saying as well, to go with a friend and kind of push each other to go and talk, which is great. We actually heard that you are moving on from Tableau. What's next for you, and what lessons are you taking with you to start over at a new company and ensuring your support of women's networks continues?
Yes, it is with a very heavy heart that I am leaving Tableau and Salesforce, but I have an amazing opportunity I could not pass up, both for me personally and professionally. I will be going on to be a chief marketing officer of a smaller company. And what really excited me about this company is it's smaller, from 80,000 people to just under 1,000. and they're going through a really big transformation where they're reevaluating the company values and the company culture. And I love building culture, and I've been able to do that really well within a team and within Tableau marketing, and having that expand even out with the Tableau community. Now imagine doing that for a company, you know, like really having that impact of a leader in a company and being part of that culture. So that's something that I'm really excited about. And the lessons that I've learned is I'm not going to wait now for a problem to happen to build a network. You know, especially I'm just so proud of this moms group. And one of the first things I had asked was, you know, what type of groups are part of this new company? You know, is there, you know, are people parents? You know, like question one, you know, that's obviously what I gravitate to the easiest. But they don't have any resources. They also use Slack. I'm like, okay, well, maybe I'll try some things. Maybe I'll start some groups. Maybe it could be, you know, broader, since it's a smaller company that's inclusive of, you know, all parents. So I think my biggest takeaway is I want to start building those communities quickly, and, you know, identifying very easy ways for people to connect and not wait for it to be a problem of not connection, but really getting ahead of that. And again, continuing to build up people around me.
Brilliant. Well, we wish you the massive good luck. And I think that
Thank you.
element of taking the proactive communities with you is admirable. So good luck. And
Thank you.
any questions from anyone here or online? Oh, yep.
Thank you for the session. Very good insights. What would you recommend for companies that are building on diversity and women? What kind of policies, or as an employee, how can I help them to build that strategy?
Yeah, so, you know, obviously depends on how a company is structured. I think the easiest place to start when you're trying to form a group is to go to your HR or employee success group if you don't have an equality and diversity group, and voice ideas. I think that's the place, is not be afraid to voice ideas. I think also, what can you do to make, you know, really things tangible and easy to get started? You know, with leaving Salesforce, you know, I was really sad to then leave this Salesforce mamas group. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I wish I would have done this externally, because I was like really sad to leave, you know, this community that I built. And I actually had, you know, within Salesforce, they have actual employee resource groups. And, you know, the president of this parent force group reached out and said, you know, like, what are other tools or things that we should be thinking about and doing? And, you know, the advice that I gave to her is, you know, really gauge different groups and what they need. So this moms groups really needed the safety to have very personal conversations. Like, they like that it's small, and they like that this is maintained and organic, versus our parents group that has, you know, like thousands and thousands and thousands of people in it. And then the other aspect of it is again identifying that gap. So one of the gaps that I've seen most recently is nothing to even really do with new parents coming back to work. It's that people leaders don't know how to support them. And so I said, I think it's an opportunity for you to look at what are some mandatory trainings for people leaders of how to best support anyone coming from any leave. You know, it's not just a maternity leave, but, you know, leaning into understanding what the benefits are, but also what are those individuals going through, and how best can a manager support them. And I think that's important for managers that can relate, managers that can't relate, you know, men supporting women, women supporting men. There's just so many different aspects of it. But again, I think it's really identifying that gap and being a voice of ideas and getting it to the right leaders to help you solve that in your company.
Awesome. Thank you. I think that awareness and education piece is also so vital. So yeah, thank you. We have a question online. Josie, do you want to read it out?
Any tips on how you would approach someone virtually, like on LinkedIn, for the first time, with an objective of making them your long-term connection?
I was kind of laughing when Sarah brought this up, because similarly, I get a lot of messages, and it's wide ranges from complete spam, right, to very salesy that just want something from me. And I have found that the people that I've like read their messages, like they know something about me, or they have found a way to already connect with me. Like, it might be, hey, I saw you, you know, on stage in the Tableau keynote, I really loved your interview with Anya. You know, like, I'm inspired by your public speaking. Is there any way you'd be willing to spend 15 minutes with me? Blah, blah, blah. I think having like some type of, you know, research to do ahead of time and to build that connection versus just sending an invite request. Don't use a generic message that LinkedIn gives you. I know that's an easy cop out. And really make it personal, but also don't be afraid of why are you reaching out? Why do you want to connect? What do you want to build in a relationship? I think is really powerful. For example, tomorrow I'm meeting with a woman who is young in her career. I just happened to connect with her dad on LinkedIn from this business conference. And she reached out to me. She's like, hey, I'm a young marketer. You know, I know that you met my dad, but obviously that's an initial connection. But she was just like, listen, I just would love your career advice. You know, I know you're probably slammed. Even if we could just meet in the next month, like, what would that look like for you? How can I help accommodate your schedule? And I was like, yeah, let's meet tomorrow. Like, she was just so personable and normal that I was like, yeah, I want to talk to normal people, you know, versus someone who just sends this canned message. And then it does require proper follow-up. You know, what other ways you can connect outside of LinkedIn? Can you take that then to email? At what point does email turn into text messaging? You know, what are those forms that you really are communicating at a more regular basis versus the, you know, bombarding everyone from a LinkedIn perspective?
Thank you very much. I think that's everything. So thank you so much. I'm really honored that you've come along today, and I really loved hearing from you. So thank you so much.
Thank you. So great for having me. I know I can't see anyone in the room, but I really appreciate being so welcomed into the broader Tableau community. I always shout out the Data+Women user group because I'm so passionate about it, and I love everything that you are all doing together. So support each other. Don't be afraid to be vulnerable. Don't be afraid to ask for help. I mean, this is a really great group. And so I'm very proud to see all the work that everyone has been doing. And thank you for including me today.
Thank you so, so much. It's been great to have you. So after that incredible Q&A, I'm going to start talking about our exercise. So I'm going to go through this, and I'm aware that we're still online and still hybrid. I'm going to go through what the actual thing is for those online and for the recording, but then we will be saying goodbye at some point and then doing an in-person exercise. So the next section is all over to you guys. I'm going to get you guys to stand up and move around. You'll have noticed when you came in that you'll have either got a blue dot or an orange dot on your lanyard. If you don't worry, Karine is going to come and give you one. The aim is that you pair up, you find someone. It doesn't matter if it's someone you know at first, that's fine. Break the ice slowly. You're going to pair up one orange and one blue, classic Tableau default colors. So then you can pair up. After that, we're going to have a 5-minute conversation where you're going to hopefully chat and connect. And we have some questions, suggestions. And then after 5 minutes, it's time to move around. The orange person will be moving around. The blue person will be staying still. And then we'll repeat it 5 or 6 times, depending on how the timing goes. And so hopefully you'll get a mix around. We might even like one time skip 2 people so that we can kind of get around you as a group, which will be good fun. So these will be 5-minute conversations. We'll have 1 minute to kind of move around and get reacquainted again. So the idea is that you can do an introduction, do your names, you can talk about where you work if you want to, and kind of it'd be great to get kind of what data you're doing, because we are a data group and we're all kind of here in the same industry. So what data stack you use, what data you like using, even that's for personal stuff as well. So for example, I really like using quantified self data and learning about myself through my data patterns, but it can be what you use at work, which is my Tableau or SQL. And then I've got some questions to use as an example, but you can also ask whatever the hell you want to. It's just to get any conversation going. But also just remember to have fun. This is a really safe space, hopefully. So it's an idea of just hopefully a way that you can do this in an environment that's not scary. And if you make a mistake, it's not a mistake, and anything is all hopefully good and happy. So these are some of the icebreakers that I have suggested. Josie is handing them around now. So I'll leave this on the screen when we get to that bit. But Josie's also handing them around if that doesn't help as well. So some icebreakers on the right. So for example, if you were a data visualization, what chart type would you be? There's some data related ones there as well. and kind of like what hobby would you turn into a full-time career? Like I probably would have been an artist if I could have theoretically made money out of it. And some fun ones as well. So for example, are you a beach vacation or a mountain getaway person? Are you a winter or a summer person? And then one of my favorite questions, are you a superhero or a villain? So take your pick, ask different ones each time, and hopefully you can have fun and find some common threads throughout these conversations. So thank you very much to those online. And thanks again, Emacs, really great to have you. So thank you all, log off now. But to those in person, find a matching person and pair up and we'll get started. So stand up and find your matching dot. Okay, go.